All right. Well, welcome, Helen. So, Helen Amery and I are both Mace Energy Method practitioners, and we thought we'd have a conversation today about how we both found the Mace Energy Method, how it has changed our work, because Helen, you have also been a coach since 2014, right?
I have,
So this
that's
is
right.
like the latest tool in both of our toolboxes. And it kind of has really transformed my work with people, and I think probably yours as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah,
So
thanks for having me.
welcome. Why don't you
Thank
tell us a little bit about you, because you have a very interesting past and how you came to be sitting with me talking about the MACE method.
you. Yeah, so I do the potted version and then we can go deeper into anything that you think would be useful for people to for us to talk about. Um, so potted version would be did the corporate thing. So I used to be in HR, and it was 10 years into that last corporate job when I actually had a hip replacement, which took me out of the business for 3 months. And frankly, a lot of the time after I was kind of finished sleeping, I was kind of bored. I had my physio exercises to do and I was going for my walks, but then I was like, what else can I do now? And so I got onto Twitter and that led me down into the world of freelance and going self-employed, which essentially then when I went back to work and felt really disenfranchised by corporate life, I was like, right, I'm going to start my own business then. I'd already started my coach training and I got to the point where I was just like, yes, I need to leave and I need to take the leap and start my own business with this coaching thing. And so back then I was very much in the world of leadership and culture and all that kind of world. Um, it was very psychology based coaching, so very much about if you've got a nasty thought, well, you'll change that, let's turn that into a nicer thought, do some positive psychology, perhaps even, symbolically throw these thoughts away and just not pay them attention. But after some time, I saw, although that worked for a short period of time, I remember using gratitude practices and things, and it did create some opening. It did create more positivity in my life. But then it was like the next wave of negative stuff came up. And so I saw that I was being reactive with my kids. I was being stressy. I was being really, quite frankly, not a nice person in a lot of places. I was fine with clients. I was very calm with clients, but not with my family, um, not with my business partner at the time. And so that led me into questioning, well, what's going on then? This psychological stuff hasn't worked. It's not doing the job it's meant to do. That's what led me into spirituality, because that's what led me into there must be something else going on. Yeah, this can't be the answer. Um, And so originally it took me, first of all, in fact, to a book called Buddhism Plain and Simple, which was a very cool book because it was very simple, as per the title, stripped of all the fluff and stuff that has been added onto it over the years. And I was reading that going, oh my God, there's something in this. This guy knows his stuff, like this Buddha guy. He knew what he was talking about. And I didn't really get it, but something in me did, at a human level, I didn't get it, but deep inside me, something was going, yes, this is a thing. So that led me into the three principles, which I know from our conversation, kind of came into your world a little bit.
Mhm.
But actually, more than the three principles, it was much more on the side of non-duality. So I didn't realize that at the time. I thought I was just talking to somebody about three principles, but later discovered actually no, there was a mixture of three P's as it gets called, and non-duality. So then I spent a bunch of time figuring out non-duality and three Ps, going, well, what's what and what are they both saying? Um, Awakening experiences, wrote a book about awakening to really bring that non-dual exploration into the completeness of spiritual being, having a human experience. And throughout all of that, have been constantly cleaning up my own human experience. So moving from the psychological with the coaching, I'd moved into different spiritual modalities, energy clearings, um, a version of internal family systems kind of work, sound baths, yoga, uh, yoga nidra. I do love a yoga nidra, I have to say. That's been relaxing. Um, but yeah, I was doing all that stuff, all the um, all the stuff that seemed to be needed to get into the body and into the energy system. It was like I'd done what I could at the level of thoughts. It was like there's much deeper stuff going on here than just sorting out my thinking. And then ultimately that led me to see, well, even that's not getting to everything. Even all of this stuff. Yes, it's lightened things. Yes, there is a lot less reactivity, but there were some areas of my life where it's like, "No, that's just not changing. Why is that not changing? Why am I still reacting against that?" And so that was what ultimately led me into Mace, because I heard about this concept of identities, and then somebody magically appeared in my world saying to somebody else, actually, it was a separate, it wasn't advice to me, it was to say to somebody else, "Oh, have you heard of the Mace Energy Method? It does this." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds exactly what I'm looking for."
Mhm.
And that was only back in February, March time this year. And then I was straight into my foundation sessions and straight into training from that. And yeah, here we are,
Here we
matter of
are.
months later.
Yes. Excellent. I know, and it's so interesting that most of the MACE practitioners that I've met have really tried so many different modalities and approaches until they found the Mace Energy Method. And that was, a similar experience that I had, in that I got certified as a personal and professional coach in 2000 because I was doing business strategy consulting, and I was realizing that most corporate cultures were highly toxic. And how could you change a culture? And I realized, well, it had to start with the heart and the spirit of the leaders of the organization. Well, how are you going to do that? And so then I became a certified coach. And I think what I realized as I'm now a Mace Energy Method practitioner is I got really good at helping people build up positive identities.
Mm,
How do you strengthen that positive identity? A lot of people came to me because they hated the corporate world and they wanted to do something else, and they wanted to find their true calling in life and what's my purpose. So I was really good at that. But yeah, I didn't understand the concept that these negative identities will really sabotage your dreams unless you can discreate them.
mm,
Right? Because
yeah,
yeah, I studied the three principles, and then three principles practitioner said, no, no, you gotta look at new non-duality. That's where it's at. And so I was studying that. And yeah, I could be like, okay, I'm not the one that's suffering. Like I am a different being, but still I suffered.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
it doesn't matter how much intellectual understanding you have about this if you cannot go to the energetic universe and discreate the source of the
Mm,
suffering.
yeah, absolutely. My goodness, yes, Caprice, I really saw that. It's like in fact, one of the turning points for me was 2023 when I was working with a coach and I was describing one of my reactive patterns. And I remember messaging and saying, well, I can see that I'm doing this, and I know that I'm doing that because of this thought, which then creates this thought and this feeling. And no, I could see, I knew this whole, well, I knew what I could see of this domino effect that led to this same repeating pattern of behavior. And she just turned around and she was like, yes, but is it changing your life? I was like, oh my God, I'm doing all this analysis, I'm doing all this figuring out, I'm doing all this like puzzle pieces of, oh yeah, this, then this, then this. But it's not changing my life. Nothing's
Mm,
actually changing. And it's so incredible, isn't it, to realize that it's, yeah, like you say, if we're not working in that energy universe
yeah.
in a powerful way, then no, we're going to keep recreating. And did you see that then where you're saying about people where you're working with creating positive identities? Did you see that like no matter what you did with a positive identity, the negative was still fundamentally driving the bus?
I mean, it really depended on the person. Since a lot of my clients, I was helping them to discover like what their purpose and their calling and create, a lot of them wanted to become self-employed. So they were a lot happier.
Mm,
Um, but I don't think I had the depth of understanding that I have now about, and we
mm,
were working at a more practical level, I think. And it's interesting what you said about like analyzing your problems, because I realized this a couple years ago that if I were in emotional pain, my defense mechanism against it was analyzing it. Like I would
mm,
go from the emotional pain into my head, you know, because
yeah.
I think most of us are just trained to live in our intellects,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
And I know when I went through my coach training in 2000, I had been so trained to live in my intellect that I was completely disconnected from my body. So we did all these body exercises, and I was like, whoa, like I have this body, and this body has its own unique intelligence, right?
Yeah, yeah, gosh.
Yeah.
And most of the world's walking around like that. Yeah, people talk about we're living in this section of the body from the neck up, and that's it. And yeah, like you say, we're missing out on so much intelligence.
And
Yeah,
it's like, so yeah, you can sit down and you could read a book about Buddhism or non-duality or whatever, but you're still operating from
yeah,
here, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than to work with a client and they're like looking around and they're going, where are all those negative emotions? Like they're gone.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so say more about your own journey, Caprice, because I don't actually know your journey from, well, not in detail, from when you first came across Mace to how it was for you, that the shifts that you experienced.
Yes. So it was, I found it through a friend, a woman that I met sent me Jerry Marzinski's website like almost 5 years ago. And I was like, why are you sending this to me? But I was very curious and intrigued. And so I had been working on an online course and I put some of his work with a link to his website in my course. And very shortly thereafter, I was attacked by these demonic entities, which I did not really understand that they existed until I experienced not only being attacked by them, but then using Jerry's methods to free myself. But it wasn't like a permanent freeing. And so when I was going back a couple years later to look at what Jerry was up to, he started talking about the Mace Energy Method. And so I was like, what? Because this worked better than anything I've ever found. And it's like, I was like this, like you, when you found it, it was this instant knowing, like I
Yeah.
instantly knew that I had to become a practitioner. And it was because, I had endured some significant childhood trauma and then relationship trauma. And I went through a really, really rough divorce 9 years ago, and I was guiding my daughters through it. And so they had this trauma that, I wanted them to have this trauma-free life. And so I had spent, I don't know, 8 years before, like just trying to figure out how can I help my daughters heal this trauma, and I looked at every healing modality.
Mm,
Nothing worked.
mm,
EFT, EMDR, all of these great, and so I thought, and then as I was looking around these past 4 years, it just occurred to me that our society seems to be designed to traumatize people. Because I have yet to meet an adult who hasn't endured some trauma.
mm.
I mean, have you met one adult who hasn't had some trauma? I,
No.
I don't think that
Mm,
that's the way life should be, but it just happens to be the way it is here in 2024. So I just said, okay, I'm going to find a way to permanently heal trauma. And I kept looking and looking. And when I found the MACE method, I was like, this is what I've been looking
oh,
for. And
amazing.
so it was first a quest to heal my own personal trauma. And I think that that's, the gift of becoming a MACE practitioner, because you're not going to get your license until they deter, your trainer's like, okay, you're
Mm.
squeaky clean.
Yeah.
So when people, they will do the foundation session and a follow up, and then I'll hear from them later and they'll say, hey, I got triggered. I'm like, don't even worry about it, because us MACE practitioners still sometimes get triggered, and we reach out to each other and say, hey, can you handle this for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I see it as an absolute delight. I don't know about you, Caprice, but the other thing that took me to Mace, as well as the fact it was, oh my God, still this pattern, it was also the fact I was so tired of talking about it. All that analysis and all that talking about, oh yeah, because this happens and then that happens, and I know it's a mirror, I know it's reflecting back to me, and but it was like, how can I talk, how can I keep talking about this? Like that's it's draining me. It's really draining me. And so that discovery of Mace and the fact that we didn't have to talk about stuff, we didn't have to,
Right.
um, yeah, go through all the narrative and the story and just be able to get straight to it. So therefore, it was great for that beginning part. It's like brilliant. I get to go to these foundation sessions. I don't have to talk about stuff. We're just going to handle all that negativity, all those negative identities. But then to be able to keep experiencing that, because it's like, well, great. I now get to jump on a call with one of the practitioners 10, 15 minutes, maybe longer if it's a slightly bigger thing. But that's like rare now. It's a quick, clear, done, good. Back in the feeling of the real me again. And carry
Right.
on. It's
Yeah.
and so it's like I don't mind if there's more stuff to come up because we've got such an amazing, reliable, effective tool to handle it. It's like I
Right.
don't mind.
Well, and it was interesting because I know that I used to hear, oh, everything that in life happens for you, right? And I was like, no way. But now that I understand how trauma and upsets in early childhood created most of my negative identities, and I think the negative identities that my clients come to me with. So before the age of 7, and
Yeah,
then what does life do? It gives you a similar experience that triggers that negative identity because then you have another opportunity to get rid of it.
absolutely. Absolutely. And it will
So,
show you again and again and again. It's like it's so
right.
reliable. That's something that I've taught for a really long time through the spiritual work I was doing before. It's like life is so patient and so reliable. It's guaranteed to keep showing you and showing you and showing you until you've actually dealt with the source, like you said before. It might be that something else, I do think that other stuff I'd done had lightened other aspects, but it was almost like this excavation process, so that
Mm.
ultimately I was left with those bare bones of like, yeah, now you've still got to look at this. Like okay, you've dealt with all that other stuff, but this is still here. And that's the other thing I love. Like you don't even have to do all of that excavation stuff. You can just go straight to it. So there's a little bit of yeah, the perfection of life to keep showing us, but also the brilliance of Mace that if you've done excavation, then fine. But if you haven't, then no worries. We can just get straight to that core, and you don't have to faff around for 10 years like I did and spend a whole load of money.
Oh, I know. I mean, you should see all the books I got rid of when I became a mace practitioner. I was like, don't need that one, don't need that one, right? Yeah, just the time and energy and effort. And I remember, my trainer Cherie being like, well, if you would have already known that you were just okay, would you have done all of that? And I'm like, no. But
Mm,
it led me to, it laid the groundwork for me being a mace practitioner.
yeah.
And it's such a gift that I want to give people. And because a lot of people come to a discovery session with me and they're like, ah, come on, now this has to be too good to be true. So it is true that many of my clients, I would say the majority, will do a foundation session and a follow-up session, and they're good.
Mm,
I also have clients who come and, a month later, 2 months later, they got triggered, their life changed, they need, another kind of tune-up.
mm, mm,
And then some are like, well, I want to do the foundation, and then I offer the specialized activity in abundance procedure, which are really powerful because going through those two specialized procedures, you can really kind of excavate some of the hidden negative identities.
mm.
So, what's been your experience? Do you think that, I mean, every individual is unique, but
Mm.
if someone says, well, am I only going to need one session? What do you usually say?
Yeah, so absolutely the standard package is those foundation sessions is that one session of 2 hours, follow up of an hour. I know that some practitioners flex those timings a bit, but it's like that's the broad offering, isn't it, of those first sessions. And my experience personally, and the experience of people that I'm working with, is predominantly that they're coming back for more. But I'm like, what, 2 months into practicing? So in fact, most of the people I've worked with so far have only had their foundation sessions. There's a few people who've come back for some more, but it's
Hmm.
it's almost like there's been this beautiful big tranche of people who've come for foundation sessions. And so now I'm really curious about how many of them will want ongoing and how many will be like you're saying and be like, oh no, two is good. But I guess what's really important for me is that people understand that just because you need more than two, it doesn't make you wrong, it doesn't make you bad, it doesn't mean you're broken, it doesn't even actually mean the process isn't working. It just means that there's some stuff that hasn't been got to in that session or wasn't fully run, or then there could be things like you said about the specialized process, or there's all different potential solutions if there's things. But ultimately, all we're saying in those first two sessions is we're going to handle what you bring to us in those first sessions. And then if there's more stuff later, that's okay. There can be more
Right.
stuff later. And again, to me, it's a gift that we get to keep cleaning up and cleaning up and cleaning up. So there's more and more and more of the real us. And as far
Hmm.
as I can see, it's the best way to live. It's the most fun way to live. It's the easiest way to live. It's the most alive way to live. Oh, in fact, I had a client yesterday who said, and she's had a lot of, so like you were saying, a lot of trauma, um, religious, the kind of stuff that gets put on kids when they're little, the fears and the dangers and the
Mm.
you're sinful and all that kind of stuff. She's had challenging relationships and health problems, all sorts of things. And yesterday we spoke, and she said, you know, the most amazing thing? I'm now living every day fully. She's like, I've realized that my time is limited. And so now I'm like grasping every day, like celebrating every day, living every day to the full, because who knows how long we've got. And we were talking about the fact that, yeah, when we've got a negative identity that tells us we're afraid of dying or that there's some danger there, you know, it's a fact we're all going to die. But these negative identities can keep us in this idea that somehow if we resist the idea of death, then we'll avoid it. Like that's not going to work. And so instead, all it does is keep us at arm's length from life because we're like, ooh, it's a bit dangerous. Let's not quite get fully in there because that's, there's potential of death there. Let's just keep it all a little bit safe and arm's length. Whereas now that she's cleared that negativity in that experience, it's like, oh, well, now I'm not, I know death's going to happen. That's going to happen to all of us. We never know when it's going to happen, which is also true for all of us. And so now, in that full clarity, she's like, well, now I can fully live. Now I can just get straight into life and fully embrace it. And it's that aliveness that I feel is like so much what's available the more we engage in these sessions and keep, yeah, to me, it's like we clean our teeth every day, we go to the bathroom every day. Like we don't keep that stuff in our system. And the more we get attuned to, oh, that's not the real me. It's like brilliant. Well, let's get that cleaned off, you know?
Right. Right. Well, and I think the thing that's tricky about this is most of us have lived with these negative identities for so long that we mistakenly believe they are us. And I even remember when I was going through my training, I got triggered really badly by this. Like, it was a negative identity that like had a lot of hate life, hate this, hate that.
Right.
And it was so familiar and so old that it literally took me 2 or 3 days until I was like, that's not you, Caprice. That's a
Oh,
negative
wow.
identity. And I remember Sharia had said, okay, just like put it on the refrigerator. So I actually got a sticky note out and I wrote down this negative identity hates, and I put all the things it hate. I stuck it on the fridge. And I literally had to do that, you know? So
Mm,
sometimes, and I don't know, maybe I was like 2 or 3 months into my training. So it wasn't that I didn't know this, it was just so familiar
yeah.
that it took me a while to realize that's not you. So, when I say anything that is not your natural state of happiness, peace, integrity, it's not you. It really isn't. And
Yeah.
knowing that, it means you could discreate it if you wanted to.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's such an important point, isn't it? You've got to want it.
Hmm.
I've seen that's always been the case with everything, like any modality I've ever engaged in. You have to first of all want to
Right.
change. You have to want it to be different, and it has to be the right modality for you at that time. And yeah, that's just massive, isn't it? Like you say, some of these identities are so convincingly us,
Hmm.
and we seem like we think we need them in some way sometimes. And so when all of that's going on, you really have to know you want to be free of it. You really have to know, yeah, this has created enough suffering in my life. Now I'm ready to be gone with this. I'm ready for that to be out of my
Right.
universe.
Right. Well, and maybe because I've been a coach since 2000, I just used to ask really like powerful, tough questions of people. I still will do that because if someone comes back to me and something didn't change, I have to ask them, what benefit are you getting from holding on to
Mm,
this negative identity?
mm, yeah.
Because we do live, I mean, at least where I live in, the United States, a society that somehow celebrates victims and
Mm,
victimhood.
mm,
And so when I first, heard in the training, you are 100% responsible for, I think what I like to say is you're 100% responsible for every emotion that you experience.
Mm.
And so knowing that's your responsibility, you can't blame anybody else for what you experience.
Yeah.
And most of us are like we're all innocent of these negative identities that we unknowingly created. So it's like this paradox of being 100% responsible and yet innocent for the source of our suffering, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that just gets clearer and clearer and clearer.
Mm,
I don't know about you, but for me, the yeah, the real clarity, the real ability to discern what's mine and what's somebody else's, what's my responsibility and what's somebody else's. You know, if you're in a work engagement or something, or even with family members,
hmm
you know, it's so much easier to see. Whereas when lost in
right.
those negative identities, it's like, oh well, this seems because one of my biggest one of the first ones was I am wrong. So on the basis that I am wrong, if anything ever happened, the assumption was it's my fault. Oh, it must be me that's got something wrong. It must be me that's made the mistake. It must be me that needs to change. It must be me that needs to take all the responsibility and fix it all, but not in a healthy responsibility way, because it was all coming from this negativity of believing I'm wrong. So there was no ability to discern and say, maybe after some time and space, you know, when that
Mm,
negativity would subside, but in the moment it was just like, oh no, it's all me, it's all my fault. I'm the one who's wrong. And therefore there's no ability to say, yeah, oh no, actually they did have a part to play in this and they did have some responsibility to take. That would kind of come afterwards when
mm.
clarity had returned. But it's so much nicer not to have to go through the dip first. Just be able to
Yes, that is so true, to just be able to respond without that knee-jerk reaction.
yeah,
And I think the other thing that especially, some men who've like come to me and they're like, well, it's not that you're always going to go through life without experiencing anger,
yeah,
because there is a place in life for righteous anger,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
but you will respond in a way that resolves the situation, doesn't make it worse. So it's not like you're never going to experience sadness or
Yeah.
anger, but it will be appropriate to the situation and you will know how to respond in a way that's right for you. So
Mm,
we're not
mm.
creating like emotionless people, right? Because emotion still has its role.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and have you seen how, because so anger's been a big one for me to learn from. I've seen that when anger is expressed in that way, that rightful, responsive anger, it actually gets results. Whereas
Mm,
before, it would actually really be frustration or irritation or some flavor of anger, and it would never get the outcome that was actually wanted, or it would be hard work, or there'd be some kind of kickback. And I
mhm,
just had this really small example the other day where my bank were needing some documents, and I'd already uploaded them to their special online uploading place twice. And they came back saying, oh no, we still haven't received your documents. And in the past, I'd have been like, oh, again, oh, it must be me. I must have done something wrong. I must need to do it a different way. And instead I wrote back going, okay, this is really frustrating now because this is now the third time you've asked me to do this. Can I just have somebody's email address, please? And I can email the documents. And I could feel this like really clean anger that it was coming from. And they responded and went, oh, actually, we have got them. Sorry, we just made a
Ah,
mistake. And I was like, oh, there we go. This is the kind of result that we can get when we're responding to life,
mhm,
including, yes, if it's an anger response. And I know that anger would have looked really dangerous to me before. It was not allowed. I imagine I probably got in trouble. I don't know. I don't have
mm,
particular memories of it, but I imagine somewhere in my childhood, probably most kids at some point in their childhood have got in
mhm,
trouble for being angry. So, yeah, to your point about us all being traumatized, yeah, because it's simple moments like that, which could
mhm,
just be the innocence of a parent who's had a tough day. Doesn't mean we've all had horrendous upbringings. That's where I see, myself included, the world is walking around, majority of the world, I call like functionally traumatized. Like
mhm,
everybody's carrying trauma, It's just that most people have been able to mask and cover it with a positive identity. The
Right.
ones I can do the work, I can get the job, I can function in what society calls acceptable and normal, and therefore the trauma gets hidden because it looks like you're okay. Look, you've got a job, you're earning money, you've got a car, you've got a house, you've got kids, whatever the sort of acceptable is counted as.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, that trauma is lurking under the surface, and it will keep showing itself to people. It will keep rearing its head. And there's always a point in everybody's life where they start to go, yeah, what is this? Why does this keep happening? Why is it wherever I go, whatever I do, whoever I'm with, it's the same thing every single time? Like, what's that common denominator? Ah, it's me. Back to your point about I am 100% responsible for my experience.
Well, and what you're making me remember is that until I had gone through the Mace training, or at some point through that, I had spent, I'm 57, so I had spent decades in survival mode. And it
Mm,
started from about early childhood because when I was 4 years old, my mother lifted a riding lawnmower, hurt her back, and she had 7 major surgeries. She was pretty much bedridden from the time I was 4 till 12, and my father was always at work. And so it was just, but I grew up in a household where we just had to pretend that everything was normal, you
right.
know? Like, so it was like this big show, and I was too young to know any other way. And so I just started out, survival, survival, survival. And then I made a negative identity of mine chose the wrong partner, the wrong. And so there was a lot of relationship trauma, and I divorced him for adultery and all this crazy stuff. And so survival, survival. And then I looked
Mm,
back and I realized even when we were married, I was always walking around on eggshells. So I
mm,
grew up just walking on eggshells, right?
mm, mm.
And so, having extensive MACE sessions myself before I became a practitioner, all of a sudden, I'm not in survival mode. I'm actually thriving. And it felt so weird. You know?
Yes.
I was like, wait, what's going on? I mean, I think I've even had to talk to some MACE practitioners about, life is so good and like be like this because it's
Yeah.
not how I experienced the majority of my life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And hence why when you're saying there before about um, you know, the comfortable conversation is to be in victim and to blame and to
Mhm.
point fingers and to kind of be in that's the kind of standard conversation, of course, because if most people are walking around in that state, that's what feels right. That's what feels like this, oh, this is just how we do things. This is just
Mhm.
what people do. And it's only when you come to clear all of that negativity that and you rise above it. There's no actual rising going on, but when we clear all that out the way, and yeah, we return to that natural state of happiness and integrity and clarity and responsiveness and responsibility. It's like, oh, yeah, it's a little bit foreign. It's like, oh,
It
yeah,
is.
like kind of
It
getting to
is.
your new
And it's
home.
right, especially for those of us who got maybe like fooled by psychology or fooled by some of the new age practices. And I'm not saying that everyone in the new age movement has ulterior motives, but there are definitely some chaos agents there, And so I got fooled by so much of that stuff. And how much can you work on yourself and then still feel like, oh, well, it doesn't work for me? So it's like, not
Mm,
only does it not
mm,
work, but then you think, well, it's just because it doesn't work for me, right?
mm.
So then
Yeah,
there's that other layer of just,
yeah,
yuck.
yeah. So perhaps it's an invitation in that for anybody who's watching, if they want to take the invitation, to really I suppose kind of like heighten the standards of what you're experiencing and receiving in anything else you've been trying. Because
Mm.
it's, yeah, there is kind of this like acceptance of, oh, it just always is always going to feel a bit rubbish. And there's also an acceptance of, oh, yes, well, we'll say things like, oh, yes, but this is generational trauma. Oh, yes, but this has been around since I was X age. Oh, yes, but I've always done this. We'll excuse things and make
Mhm.
up um, justifiable reasons as to why this keeps happening or why it's not changing or why it's not moving. so yeah, really feel this invitation to really challenge that for yourself, if that's what's resonating for anybody who's watching, to go, so does it actually have to be like that? Do I actually have to continue in this pattern over and over again? Do I actually have to keep trying another modality and another modality and another modality? And yeah, if they reach that point of going, yeah, I want this gone, that's
Right,
exactly the energy of great, come to Mason.
right.
Let's
Well, and the other thing that's so beautiful about the Mace Energy Method is even though you and I, as practitioners, are guiding people through these procedures, they are doing all the work
yeah,
because they unknowingly created these negative identities and emotions that they've been living through. So it's them that has to discreate it,
yeah,
but they
yeah,
just need a guide, you know? And I
yeah.
think that was the other thing that was a little tricky for me because I was such like even though I was kind of a self-help junkie for a while, I was also like a DIY self-help junkie, you know? So I was
Yeah.
like reading the books and, you know, I didn't, even though I was a coach, I didn't hire a lot of coaches for myself. And often, and the few that I didn't really give me what I needed.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
so yes, the Mace Energy Method is not a DIY, but at the same time, it's empowering to you because you're doing the work. And I also like the fact that you cannot use this method to control or manipulate anyone.
yeah. Yeah, it's so clean and clear and so based on the actual data for that person in that moment, isn't it? It's like we
Mm,
don't assume anything as practitioners. We don't overlay our own assessment or judgment of their experience. It's always asking that individual about their actual experience in that moment, and we work with that data. Like that's and I love it for that. It's so real and it's
mhm,
so reliable, and it provides us with that feedback in the moment, doesn't it? With each thing, it's something I loved when I first came to it. The fact that in the session I was being asked to check back on what we were just discreating, to get the evidence right there and then that that
mm,
reaction that had been there a moment before was gone. It's like,
right,
oh my God. So you don't have to,
right,
oh, cross my fingers, I hope this has worked, and I'll just, sit on the edge of my seat and wait in case that reaction comes up again. It's like, oh my God, I've literally got the evidence right there that that is
right.
gone. And I
You know,
love that.
that's so true. And I was looking through some of the articles that John Mace wrote because I was looking for one to send a client. And I was reading this article, and I think it was called The Power of Now. And he was saying that the reason that he was writing down the things he was handling with the client was not because he was going to be using it in the future, because once it's gone, but that sometimes people would be like, well, you know, I don't really feel that different because once they had discreated all of this emotional garbage, they couldn't remember it. And he
Yeah,
said, but remember, you wanted to work on this and now
yeah,
it's gone. And he was like,
yeah,
oh, I forgot about that.
yeah,
So I think that that's really interesting, you know, that
yeah,
people just all of a sudden, you know, won't even be able to remember what used to bother them,
yeah, yeah. It's
which
so
is,
empowering, isn't it? And
yeah.
yeah, I've seen that a lot when people come for their second foundation session and we're checking back on what we've done in the previous session. And it's like, oh, I don't remember that example. I don't know what that was. There's no, certainly no reaction. It's like a different person. People often would say that as well when we
Mhm.
read what they brought to their first session, and then we're checking back on that at the end of the second session, and they're like, I don't recognize that person. Like that's not me. That's not me. And it's
Right.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I
incredible.
remember a woman I worked with at the end of the session, she's crying and she goes, it's okay, Caprice, these are tears of joy. And I
Amazing.
said, well, that is beautiful.
Amazing.
You just cry those tears of joy, you know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. What a gift. Aren't we lucky that this is what we found that, or that found us, whichever way it all happened
Yeah,
together.
no, exactly. Like there really aren't any coincidences in life,
Yeah.
are there? So good. Well, I don't even know. I think I've lost track of time. This is a great conversation. Is there anything else that you want to share with people, like who might be feeling lost or confused and I've already tried it
Hmm.
all.
Yeah, I think there was something actually when you were talking there about the fact it's not a DIY process, which I also really wanted it to be. Like when I first came across it, I was like, oh, there must be a way to make this DIY. But then
Right.
interestingly, once you've tried it and you've realized the power of having somebody sitting there with you to guide you, it's like, oh no, I would not want this to be DIY. I know the power of me being able to stay in my world and my experience and know that I'm being held by somebody out there who's got their
Mhm.
eye on the outside so that I can fully be in this here. It's, yeah, I really, really, absolutely 1,000,000% appreciate now why that is the case. But it also reminded me about the fact, and something else which I really love about this process, is that you're not in any kind of altered state. So there's no weird woo-woo. Yeah, you're not in any kind of altered state at all. There's no fluffy or, yeah, there's just nothing weird about it. It's like you are a person sitting in your chair. Yes, you've got your eyes closed because that's the process. You need to have your eyes closed, but that's it. Other than that, you're a person in normal conscious state, having a
Right.
really a conversation. Yes, we have certain things that we'll say or ask because that's the process, but we're working with that individual in that moment to guide them through that process for themselves. And like you said, they're doing the work because they have to. It's their universe, they have to do that work. But as work goes, it's pretty damn simple, isn't it?
It is. It's so profoundly simple and powerful. And yeah, and that's what I tell people when I begin the foundation session, that I will go through an introduction and then I'm going to ask you, are you ready to begin? And that's so that you know you are giving me permission to work with you
Mm,
and that you're always in control of the session.
yeah.
Yeah, because I've had some people ask me, well, are you going to hypnotize me? And I'm like,
Mm,
absolutely not. That is
yeah.
not part of this at all. That is the antithesis of what this is, because we're not hypnotizing you and putting suggestions into, your being at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Uh, we're just guiding you to do what you know. It's my
Yeah.
spiritual being working with your spiritual being.
Yeah. 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 And interestingly, I've never done any hypnotherapy either as a practitioner or a recipient of it. And so when a hypnotherapist came to me saying, is this really different from hypnotherapy? Is this really going to, I've seen things repackaged so many times, old wine, new bottles kind of thing. Is this
Mm.
really different? And I said, I've got no idea because I don't have any experience of hypnotherapy, so I
Um,
can't give you any data on that. I don't know. I don't know what the comparison would be. But I said, you're welcome to try it. If you have the session and you say this is just hypnotherapy in a new bottle, then I'm very happy to give you your money back and not charge you. Because yeah, like I said, I don't have the experience to be able to tell you. Anyway, safe to say, it is not like hypnotherapy. And she's had results that she never would have expected. And yeah, realizes how much of her own journey to that point had been dealing with some of the more surface stuff, but never really getting to that other stuff in the background that she was kind of almost dancing around in front of.
uh,
Another version of, a face to the world, like you were saying about, at
mhm.
home, yeah, everything's fine while mum's in
Right.
bed. So she was doing that, going, yeah, yeah, it's all good, it's all good. I'm working on my stuff, I'm working on my stuff. And then, oh my God, there's a whole junk room of stuff back here that
Right.
I hadn't even realized was there, which of course is the point. If we'd realized it was there, we would have done something about it. If we could access it in some other way, we'd have done something about it. But this is the
Right.
thing that Mace is so awesome for, that it gets to that stuff that it always makes me think of like a cleaning product advert. Gets to those places, the tough places that nothing else can reach.
Right. Without reliving it or talking about it.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is so powerful too, because
yeah.
I know, in my quest to resolve my own trauma, I mean, I had relived it so many times in my own head that,
Mm, yeah.
mhm.
Which doesn't help it change.
No, it just strengthens kind of the power that the past has over you.
Mm,
And, I've kind of, since we know that we're all energetic vibrational beings, when I see old people and I see how stooped over they are, I feel like, oh my goodness, that is just like the weight of all of this unresolved trauma that they've never healed,
yeah,
pushing down.
yeah, yeah. Because it
Mm.
does affect the body, absolutely.
Because how many of your clients at the end of their foundation session say, I just feel so much lighter? I mean, the
Yeah,
thing that I get is happy, calm, light are kind of the more common terms that I hear about how people
yeah,
feel.
yeah. Those absolutely, yeah, peaceful, relaxed,
Yeah.
alive. Actually, I've had a couple of clients who've um wanted to go off and run around and like dance or do something quite energetic afterwards, but with a really like vibrant aliveness.
Mm,
Yeah, most have been in the calm, peaceful zone, and then yeah, some just feel
right.
that happiness, that absolute rightness with themselves, with everything.
Right, because they just got back all of that energy that was trapped in negativity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got a theory, which I'm kind of half testing, which is that if we've like been really overdoing it in life, which I had been, like really working, doing a lot for others, and all driven from negativity, so a lot of wasted energy as well that was resisting the negativity while doing all the stuff. Um, and I absolutely had an experience after my first session. I sat for 90 minutes in a chair, did not move, had no inclination to move, which is so the opposite of how I had been in life, always up and doing and busy, and there's always something to do. Um, and then these clients who've had the opposite experience and had lots of energy at the end, they've often been people who've procrastinated or found it hard to get going or just generally felt kind of low energy in life. And then, yeah, they've had this aliveness. So I've kind of got this little theory of it kind of enables you to access this opposite that you've in some way been denying. And then I've seen that I've come back to a balance where I still do like I'm a natural doer, but it's
Hmm.
coming from such a peaceful, calm, grounded, okay place that it doesn't feel draining. It still feels energizing because it's like because I'm loving it, because I'm enjoying it, because I feel fueled by that, yeah, alive spirit that we are. So it's yeah, so yeah, it looks to me like we kind of drop into the opposite and then we can come back to whatever our version of healthy balance is for us.
I'm gonna pay more attention to your theory because when I think back on my training, I remember that all of a sudden, all of these like kind of projects around my house that I've been procrastinating on, I just did easily and
Oh,
effortlessly.
wow.
But I
Cool.
also had a similar experience of being able just to sit and be and
Mm,
do nothing, just peacefully and calmly and contentedly for the
mm,
first time in my life, to just be.
mm. Yeah,
Hmm. Which is such a gift as
yeah,
well.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, well, good.
I was just thinking maybe to close off, the thing that just popped into my head there was some of the perhaps some of the reactions or some of the ways of being that get counted as normal, but which now from this perspective you can go, well, it might be normal, but that's really not your natural state. Like that's really not the real you. What are some of those for you that really stand out as like common things that people um miss because they think, well, this is just how it is to be human. Like we just
Mm.
have to suck this up. Like this is just part of being a human.
I mean, I think one thing is, I don't know why health just popped to mind. I think some people just assume that it's a natural state of being to be in a state of dis-ease,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
even though we never claim to heal anybody, if there's an energetic component, we can handle that.
Mm.
And so I think people just assume that they don't assume that their natural state is this vibrant, alive, energized being,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and especially that thing of, well, I'm older and therefore of course I'm getting more ill, or of course I've got more problems versus some of the problems could in fact be caused by that energetic stuff that you've not handled and you've kept resisting, and therefore it's got worse and your health has
right.
got worse. Yeah,
I guess the other thing that comes to mind is because, I have two daughters who are 18 and 22, and you have two teenage
I
children.
have. Yeah, 17 and 15 right now. Yeah.
Okay. So their generation has been somehow programmed to assume that mental illness is natural.
Mm, oh wow. I've not heard
Um,
that.
And so I don't know in the UK, but in the United States, 25% of teenagers and young people are on antidepressants and
Wow.
some sort of psychiatric drug,
Mm,
which unfortunately, if you would read the, slip that comes with it, side effects include depression, anxiety, suicide, suicidal thoughts. I mean, these are not the solution.
mm.
But it's just assumed that social anxiety is natural. And I mean, I know that, I remember being 18 and feeling awkward and, but but I also didn't understand how we operate. If I had a Mace session when I was 10, I probably wouldn't have had that experience. So I think that there's just such a natural a tendency to think that being depressed and anxious is natural.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I think about that the other day actually, when in terms of there are so many coping strategies around, there are so many, um, well, conversations around mental health now, which on the one hand you can go, well, that's great because it's not in the closet anymore. At
Mm.
least at least people are talking about it, so it's raising it in the conversation. But then it's the next step after that, where the solution tends to be, yeah, well, cope. Here's some ways to cope. Do some tapping or do some breathing or do something that kind of gets you through that moment so that you can feel okay again, rather than, well, you can deal with the source of the problem and then you don't have to do any tapping or breathing or anything. You can just live. Or, like
Mm.
you say, worst case scenario, we have a load of people on antidepressants when it's not a source, it's another smothering, it's another mask to try and hide what's actually behind it all. Um, so yeah, it's like this double-edged sword of great that people are actually being open about it, but the solutions aren't really solutions, they're sticking plasters. And I've always been a big advocate for not doing sticky plaster solutions. I've always been a let's get to the root. And I feel like at last I have made it. There's so many times I've been like, this is the root cause. Oh no, there's another level. Oh, there's another level. I do think this is now the bottom. I don't think there's anywhere else for us to go than this. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So you can go to the root cause and you can also get rid of any guilt or shame that you've been carrying around, thinking I'm broken, what's wrong with me? No, no, you just
Yeah.
accidentally created a negative identity that you can discreate.
Yeah. Funny, so funny. I was literally thinking guilt and shame are another two great examples of what gets counted as just a normal human experience. The yeah, mums feeling guilty for how they've raised their kids or whether they're going to college or not, or like as if that's their personal responsibility for all of that. Um,
Right,
it doesn't have
right.
to be like that. There is so
Well,
much more
because
freedom.
yeah, I mean, I've made some poor decisions and poor choices in my life. And maybe before, my Mace training, I would have felt guilt or shame about this. And the funny thing is now I look at those and I go, well, who made those decisions? Because it certainly wasn't me. It wasn't the real me. Like, who was making that decision?
Mm.
But
Makes
there's no
sense at the
guilt or
time,
shame
doesn't it?
about it. Yeah, it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, oops. I
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
mean, I'm not going to repeat any of those mistakes in the future, but I certainly am not beating myself up for them now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh, that's a good normal one you could watch out for. Because what I've seen is the incredible effectiveness of us as learning systems, and so
Mm.
much more easily when we're cleared out of all the crap. So if people are noticing this pattern of like either not learning from mistakes or perhaps even not wanting to go near learning because that might bring up a whole bunch of reactivity. Um, Issues with authority is a really common one. People thinking, oh, they're better than me, and either shrinking against away from that or, pushing back in reaction against it. That's all kind of counted as normal. Like, oh, of course you don't like authority. It's like, well,
Yeah, right. But you don't have to rebel in a way that's going to harm you.
yeah,
Well, it's
yeah.
interesting, for our training, like we always start with any wounds that we had around learning or schooling.
Mm,
I think that's why I'm such a strong advocate for self-directed learning and homeschooling because there's a lot of wounds that take place in the school experience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not surprisingly, right? kind of environment it is, the
Mm,
system of it, the other kids going through their own experiences, and these little people who are so influenced. And like you said, before 7, we were impacted by so much. So
mhm,
much is kind of already installed in the system by that point. So at that very young age, yeah, we've got all these kids impacting us, teachers, parents. It's a
mhm.
lot for a little person. Yeah.
It just reminds. So I worked with a woman who was dealing with a lot of anger and rage issues. And after our foundation and our follow-up, she felt that her 6-year-old son may have been impacted by some of that, and wondered if we could do a session with him. And so, she was with him. We brought him on. We talked, and she said, "This is what I think my son's dealing with." Da, da. And she turned, he's right there. Yes, Mom, that's exactly it. And um, so we handled his issue in a way that I said, well, he had, I think, a PlayStation or an Xbox. So I said, okay, we'll put it on the screen. And do you have a Nerf gun? Okay, so make an image on the screen and just blow it away with your Nerf gun. It took him like 30 seconds to handle this. And
Wow.
he's just smiling and he's happy. I think he had this, he was afraid of making a mistake. And so it
Hmm.
came up in a lot of his schoolwork. He was homeschooled. But and then, his mom's like, "Is there anything else you want to handle?" "No, Mom, I'm great." And so, just knowing that this does work on children, and
Yeah.
they often will get it so much faster than us older people.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, obviously, I've not worked with any children or young people yet, but I'd always had the assumption that they would breeze through it. And
Yeah.
yeah, just as we get older, we've had so much more time to believe it's who we are, to get entangled with it, to resist it a whole lot more,
Mhm.
making it all the stronger, and that's okay because the process can handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Oh, yeah, you're right. We normalize so much unhappiness and dissatisfaction, and that's not necessary.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
hurrah, we can wave the flag for it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
There is another life available.
Excellent. Okay, so where can people find you, Helen?
Oh yeah, thanks. So my website is Wild Fig Solutions, all one word, which connects with the whole root cause thing I was talking about a moment ago. So when I was first starting my business, somebody said to me, "Oh, you seem to really like getting to root cause of the problem instead of these sticky plaster solutions." And I was like, "Oh yeah, root cause," and I like trees. And then I Googled which tree has the deepest roots in the world, and it was the wild fig. So
Oh,
I created Wild Fig Solutions. So that's my website. Currently in need of an overhaul because of the rapid change this year from what I was doing before to now doing Mace. But I do have all my Mace stuff set up on there. So it's kind of a like, ignore all the other stuff that's not Mace. Look at the Mace stuff. That's that's what I'm paying attention
right.
to. And I will get to revise the whole thing. But yeah, so I've got my how to book my sessions on there. Um, I've also got YouTube and Facebook and Threads and LinkedIn, depending where people like hanging out.
Okay.
But links to all of that from my website too, and a
Okay,
newsletter.
good. Well, I'll put links in the description down below, and you can find me
Yeah,
at capricethorsen.com. I just made it pretty easy. So,
yeah,
okay. Well, great. Thank you.
amazing.
It's been wonderful having this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Take care, Caprice.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let